New Annotated H.P. Lovecraft, Beyond Arkham. Introduction by Victor LaValle, edited with a foreword and notes by Leslie S. Klinger. From the introduction. I snapped up those paperbacks for the covers more than the author. Maybe I'd heard the name Lovecraft, here or there, Stephen King name-checking him in Dance Macabre, perhaps. But he didn't mean anything more to me than that. The Strange High House in the Mist, collected in this volume, is the first story I remember making me real. I didn't even make it through the first paragraph before I felt my wig blown back. It took only 3 sentences. In the morning, mist comes up from the sea by the cliffs beyond Kingsport. White and feathery, it comes from the deep to its brothers, the clouds, full of dreams and dank pastures and caves of Leviathan. And later, in still summer rains on the steep roofs of poets, the clouds scatter bits of those dreams, that men shall not live without rumor of old strange secrets and wonders that planets tell planets alone in the night. That last bit, secrets and wonders that planets tell planets alone in the night, gave me the serious shivers. It's something similar in mood to the famous opening paragraph of Shirley Jackson's Haunting of Hill House. That's how it read to me. Lovecraft is dinged for being a bit purple with his prose, but what emotional register would you use when discussing the secrets planets share? 10-year-old me was here for all of it. The high anxiety, waves of madness, and the terror of human insignificance. Certain writers must be encountered at a young age, or else the spell will never be cast properly. Some people would say this is because an older reader has matured out of the appeal such pulp provides, but I call bullshit on that. Instead, I would say that as a child, the aperture of your imagination is wide open. In adulthood, we call its closure maturity, but that hardly seems like a triumph to me. Instead, I still try to embrace the bravery of such openness, though I admit it does get more difficult. But back then, nothing imaginative was alien to me. All this is to say, I felt smitten with Howard Phillips Lovecraft and his work. I'm hardly the only one. He didn't become a foundational author of the modern horror canon by accident, and my love remained pure until age 15 or so. Something strange happened when I reread him at that stage. There were aspects of his writing that I simply hadn't noticed before, but as a slightly more mature reader, I couldn't ignore them anymore. I realized that H.P. Lovecraft had been a racist. A perfect example can be found in this volume, The Rats in the Walls. The narrative could be summed like this. No one should look too deeply into his family past. Terrible truths are hiding there, a not uncommon theme in the Lovecraft oeuvre. At 10 years old, I'd enjoyed this story just fine, but this time I wasn't a child, and at 15, I actually registered the name of the narrator's cat. N-word man. I remember distinctly closing the book and looking at the old Del Rey cover, wondering if somehow my old copy had been switched out. That couldn't have always been the name of the cat. I couldn't possibly have overlooked it, especially since the name comes up, by my count, 19 damn times. By the end of the tale, I felt pummeled. I hardly noticed the plot or the language or the mood of the tale. This time, the only horror in the story was that cat. And now, when I read At the Mountains of Madness, I couldn't help noticing that the Shoggoths, the race of genetically engineered slaves, were not who the narrator empathized with. Instead, he seemed to sympathize with the elder gods, whose chattel at some point long ago had risen up and resisted their enslavement. My sense of betrayal felt as deep as the catacombs beneath the home and the rats in the walls. Soon after, I came across a piece of Lovecraft juvenilia, an early poem. It's called On the Creation of N-Words. Yeah. So, at 15, I stopped reading H.P. Lovecraft. If you've ever loved an author, felt the effect of his or her imagination right down in your DNA, you'll know what it means to reject a beloved writer entirely. You'll understand the heartache I felt as I threw away those Del Rey paperbacks. Obviously, I returned to reading the man again, but the journey to get here took me decades. I remained disdainful of Lovecraft even as I devoured the work of his acolytes, Fritz Leiber, Robert Bloch, and Ramsey Campbell, to name 3 of my favorites. Much of the old master's influence was visible in their fiction, but not all of it, not the worst of it. Soon I read the writers inspired by these 3 giants, and on, until eventually I became one of them too, a writer within this tradition. Even if I hadn't read Lovecraft's fiction in decades, its imprint was impossible to miss. In a way, I embodied one of Lovecraft's oldest tropes, a man with a tainted lineage, a flaw at the root of the family tree. But when faced with the truth of Lovecraft's flaw, I deviated from the old storyline. I wasn't driven mad by the knowledge, not anymore. Still get angry about it, though.